You know, life, it's like a tapestry. Up close, we see only the tangled threads, the knots, the colors that seem to mismatch. But God, from above, sees the whole picture. Today, I want to tell you a story about these threads, about how a detail that seemed lost in time was actually the tip of the thread God had been holding all along. It's the story of Donna Clara. A woman of gentle faith, but with an emptiness in her heart that had lasted for 60 years. An emptiness shaped like an old photograph, a photo she looked at every day. Have you ever felt that? A longing for something you don't even know existed? Yes, Clara did. She lived alone, in a silent house where the only constant sound was the ticking of the wall clock in the living room. A house filled with memories of her parents, who had long since passed away. And on her nightstand, inside a small hardwood box, was the photographs. It wasn't a large one. It was small, worn, with yellowed edges and that smell of old paper and mystery. In the photo, her mother, very young, smiled. A beautiful smile, but with a hint of melancholy. She held a baby in her arms. A newborn, wrapped in a white blanket. Clara knew that photo well. And that was where her heart stumbled. Clara was raised an only child. Her parents, good and devout people, always told her, "You were God's gift to us, our only joy." And she believed it. But, what about the baby in the photo? As a child, she asked. "Ah, my daughter," her mother would say, changing the subject, "it's a neighbor's child I once held." But Clara's heart, her heart wasn't convinced. There was something in her mother's gaze upon that baby, something that wasn't the look of someone holding a neighbor's child. It was a look of possession, of deep love, and of pain. Clara, now 68, looked at the photo and the feeling was the same. A pang of loneliness she couldn't explain. A feeling that a piece was missing from her life. The house was complete, her faith was firm, but there was a room in her soul that felt empty. Locked. And the key, she felt, was in that faded image. She ran her fingers over the baby's face. So small. So familiar. She prayed every night, with the photo in her hand. "My God, why this restlessness? What do you want to tell me with this? If it's just me, why does my heart insist on searching for someone else?" Silence was the only answer. The ticking of the clock. The dust dancing in the beam of light coming through the window. The photo, silent, held its secret. Clara felt time passing. Soon she would join her parents. And she was afraid of leaving without understanding what her soul had been searching for so fervently. What had that photograph, worn by time and silent tears, been trying to tell her, for 60 years? Yes, my dear, waiting. Waiting is God's classroom. And Clara, oh, Clara had been in that class for decades. Don't think this doubt only arose in old age. No. Photography was the silent companion of her entire life. In her youth, when her friends spoke of their siblings, their fights, their complicities, Clara would smile, but inside, she felt a pang. She looked at the hidden photo. Was it him? Was it her? A brother? A sister? Her mother would say, "Only child, double blessing," and hug her. But the embrace seemed incomplete. In adulthood, when her own children were born, she looked at them and the feeling returned. The love she felt, was it the same love she saw in her mother's eyes in the photograph? And if it was, why would her mother deny it? When her parents fell ill, one after the other, Clara cared for them with a devotion that was moving. Sleepless nights, holding hands, prayers. At various moments, she was on the verge of asking. With her heart in her throat, she would approach her mother's bed, already weak, and say, "Mom, that photo." But her mother would just smile, squeeze her hand, and say, "You were my greatest joy, Clara." And Clara's heart would break. How could she disturb her mother's peace in her final moments? How could she bring to light something that had clearly been buried beneath so much silence and, perhaps, so much pain? So, she fell silent. Her father left soon after. And with them, the secret seemed to have been sealed forever. Now, in the solitude of the empty house, the photo was no longer just a doubt. It was a testament to silence. It was the symbol of a lifetime of, almost complete. Almost at peace. Do you understand, my dear? That feeling of being on the edge of a river and unable to cross. Clara was like that. She cleaned the house, tended the flowers, went to church. Her faith was her anchor. Lord, she said, I don't understand. But I trust. If it is your will that I live and die with this emptiness, so be it. But if there is an answer, my God, my ears are open. The years accumulated like dust on the furniture. Clara's hair turned white as cotton. Her hands, which had worked so hard, now trembled a little as they held her coffee cup. And the photo was still there. Unchanging. The mother's smile. The mysterious baby. With each passing day, the hope of an answer diminished. It seemed impossible. Too late. The world had moved on. The people who knew were no longer here. The photograph was now just a snapshot of a past that could no longer be questioned. Clara was resigning herself to living with the question. Little did she know that God doesn't measure time as we do. Little did she know that the answer was near. Not in the distant past, but right there, inside her own home, waiting for the right moment to be found. Change, my son, my daughter, rarely comes with trumpets. Sometimes it arrives in the silence of a rainy afternoon, smelling of mildew and mothballs. That's exactly how it was for Donna Clara. It was a Saturday. One of those light winter rains that cleanse the soul and bring back memories. Clara decided to pack the trunk of her old wardrobe, the one that had belonged to her parents. It was a task she'd been putting off for years. It was too heavy to move. But that day, she felt an impulse. A gentle courage. She carefully climbed onto the stool and opened the heavy doors. The scent of cedar and thyme greeted her. There in the back, behind yellow sheets and blankets she'd forgotten existed, was a hat box. Blue, faded. A box she'd never seen, or maybe never had. Provided attention. She went downstairs with the box, her heart beating a little faster. Why? She didn't know. She sat on the bed and opened it. Inside, there were no hats. There were baby things. Small things, delicately stored. A pair of woolen shoes, so tiny they looked like dolls. A bonnet. And, at the bottom, folded with almost sacred care, a slouch. A baptismal gown. Clara frowned. She knew hers. It was stored in another box, with her name embroidered on it. This one was different. It was simpler. And it looked older. She took the outfit in her hands. The fabric was soft, a fine linen. And as she unfolded it, something fell into her lap. A small thing. It was a crib medallion, worn silver, with the image of a guardian angel. And tied to it, with a knot tightened by time, was a blue satin ribbon, now almost gray. And on that ribbon, there was something embroidered. With white thread, almost faded. Clara leaned closer to the window's light, squinting to see. The letters were hard to read, but she managed. Antonio. Clara's heart stopped. And then raced. Antonio. Who was Antonio? There was no one in the family with that name. No one. She looked at the photo on the nightstand. The baby. The unnamed baby. She looked at the ribbon. Antonio. The two things, they clashed in her mind. He wasn't a neighbor's son. Neighbors don't leave baptismal gowns and medals in other people's houses. That was his name. Antonio. The name was a key. The first key she'd found in 60 years. But, a key to what door? The name alone didn't tell her where he was, or what had happened. It was just an echo. But it was the first sound she'd heard in that decades-long silence. Who were you, Antonio? You know, my dear, when God decides to act, he doesn't just send a sign. He begins to connect the dots. And Clara's life, which seemed like a straight line of waiting, suddenly began to fill with twists and turns and encounters. The name Antonio changed everything. It was no longer a daydream. It was a mission. Clara no longer looked at the photo with sadness, she looked at it with inquiry. But where to begin? Her parents were gone. Her uncles, too. She was alone with that name. She prayed. She asked the Lord that, if he had shown her the name, he would show her the way. And the answer came, in an unexpected way. The following week, at Sunday service, the pastor spoke about genealogy. About the importance of knowing our roots, about the lineages of the Bible. Clara felt a shiver. It was for her. After the service, she went to speak with a sister from the church, Dona Zilda, a woman everyone knew spent her days in the city archives, creating everyone's family tree. Clara, her voice trembling, told part of the story. Mrs. Zilda, do you think that it's possible to find someone's birth certificate, just with their first name and their parents' names? Mrs. Zilda smiled with her eyes. My daughter, for God and the dust of the archives, nothing is impossible. Come with me tomorrow. The next day, Clara was there. The place smelled of old paper and glue. They spent hours, leafing through giant books, their handwriting almost illegible. Clara searched for her last name, her parents' last name. And then, she found it. It wasn't a baptismal record. It was a hospital record. A birth registry from the old city hospital. Her mother's name. Her father's name. And there it was. The date, May 14, 1953. 2 years before Clara was born. Born, Antonio. Weight, 2 kilos and 800. Alive. Clara put her hand to her mouth. Tears came. He was real. He was born. He was vivo, but the joy was short-lived. Beside the name Antonio was a note written with another, more hurried pen, delivered. Just that. Delivered. Delivered to whom? Why? Dona Zilda, with her wisdom, touched Clara's shoulder. Calm down, my daughter. This happened a lot. Difficulties, promises, maybe they couldn't afford it. But Clara couldn't hear it. Delivered. The word echoed like abandonment. The baby in the photo, the Antonio on the ribbon, he was given away. And now? The hospital record was the end of the line. It didn't say where he went. Clara felt the ground disappear. She had found the name, only to discover it had been erased. She returned home with a heavier heart than before. She now knew she had had a brother. And she knew he had been taken from her. The photo now hurt more. It was the portrait of goodbye. Oh, my dear, sometimes we think we've reached the end of the road, don't we? We hit a wall. Clara found the wall of the word delivered. It seemed like the end. But what she didn't know was that she wasn't looking at the photo with the right eyes. She arrived home that day, devastated. The light rain had returned. She made some tea and sat in her armchair. The silence of the house seemed to scream Antonio's absence. She picked up the photographs. Now she knew his name. Antonio, she whispered. My brother. She cried. She cried for her parents, who held this pain. She cried for him, who grew up far away. And she cried for herself, who lived a lifetime missing him without knowing why. She looked at the photo with a new intensity. She no longer looked for a resemblance. She searched for a clue. The baby was wrapped in a blanket. The mother smiled. But the eyes, now she saw them. It wasn't just melancholy. It was farewell. The smile was for him. One last memory. She turned the photo over. The back was yellowed, glued to black cardstock, like they used to do. She had looked at it 1,000 times. There was nothing. But that day, with her hands still trembling from crying, she felt something. A relief. Right in the corner, the cardstock was slightly peeled. A tiny point. Her heart skipped a beat. She ran to the kitchen and grabbed a small, fine-tipped knife. With the care of a surgeon, she peeled it away. The paper was dry, brittle. She peeled it away, afraid of tearing the photo. And then, she saw it. It wasn't on the card. It was written on phone photographs. On the back. Thin, almost faded handwriting, written in fountain pen. The handwriting, her father's handwriting. There were only a few words. But they were the words that would change everything. It said, "My son, Antonio. May God keep you. Wherever you are. One day we will meet. Your father, who loves you." 1953, Clara sobbed. A sound that came from the depths of her soul. The hidden detail. It wasn't a photographer's note. It was a prayer. A blessing. A promise. One day we will meet. Her father hadn't forgotten him. He loved him. But the words, they didn't say where he was. Clara was desperate. One day when, my God. Daddy's gone. Mommy's gone. How? And then she looked back at the writing, and at the photo. The blanket. The blanket he was wrapped in, had a small embroidery in the corner. A coat of arms. A symbol. She picked up the magnifying glass she used to read the Bible. The embroidery was a cross and 2 hands. The symbol, she knew it. It was the symbol of the Orphanage of the Sisters of Charity, which was in the neighboring town but had closed over 30 years ago. The word delivered wasn't for a person. It was for an institution. That night, Clara didn't sleep. The next morning, she took a bus to the neighboring town. The orphanage was now an office building. But the chapel still stood. And there, she met an elderly priest who, she remembered. He helped her search the diocese archives. And they found him. Antonio. Adopted by a good family. His new surname. The town they were headed to. Her heart pounding, Clara, with the priest's help, made a call. On the other end, a man's voice, a calm, mature voice, answered. "Hello." Clara took a deep breath. "Please. I'm looking for a man named Antonio, born in 1953. There was silence. And the voice answered, "Yes, it's me. Who would like that?" And Clara, with tears streaming down her face, said the word she'd waited 60 years to say, "Antonio. I think I'm your sister." The following week, he was at her door. A tall man with gray hair and his mother's eyes. The same eyes in the photo. He, too, had spent his life searching. He, too, had a copy of that photo. The only thing his adoptive parents had of him. When Clara showed him the laserbones and the little blue ribbon, he broke down. And there, in Dona Clara's silent living room, 2 lives that had grown apart by pain and secrecy, finally embraced. The emptiness, the hole in Clara's soul, was finally filled. Well, my dear, what a story, isn't it? The ticking of the clock in Dona Clara's house seems even softer now. The silence, which once was solitary, is now peaceful. She and Antonio spend hours talking, making up for lost time. 60 years of waiting, resolved by a hidden detail in an old photo and the faith of a woman who never stopped asking. What does this story teach us? For me, it teaches that God writes straight, even if He uses the crooked lines of our lives, our pain, our secrets. Clara's parents, perhaps out of shame, perhaps out of immense grief, chose silence. But love, her father's love left a trail. A small inscription on the back of a photo. A prayer. One day we will meet. And God honored that prayer. God kept that photo, kept that baptismal gown, kept the aunt's memory, kept the archives in the church basement. He kept every piece of this puzzle. He was just waiting for Clara's heart to be ready. Ready to discover, ready to forgive her parents' silence, and ready to love. Sometimes, my son, we have an old photo in our lives. A problem we look at every day. A pain we don't understand. A question that won't go away. And we pray, and it seems God is silent. It seems the answer doesn't come. But Clara's story reminds us that God's silence isn't absence. It's preparation. He's arranging the pieces. He's waiting for the exact moment when the rain will fall, when the trunk will be opened, when the hidden detail will come to light. What about you? What's the old photo you've been looking at every day? What's your family's secret, the pain in your heart, that you think it's too late to solve? Do you feel like a piece is missing from the puzzle of your life? I want to invite you to do something. Here in the comments, you don't have to tell your secret, no. But share with me, have you ever had an experience where God revealed something that was hidden for a long time? An answer that arrived at the right time. Tell your story of faith. Let's transform this space into a large balcony where one tells the story and the other listens with their heart. Your story could be the hidden detail someone needs to renew their faith today. If this story of Donna Clara and Antonio touched your soul, leave your amen. Like it so this message of hope reaches more waiting hearts. And, of course, subscribe to our channel so we can continue sharing these stories together. Remember, no matter how worn your photo is, no matter how hidden the detail. For God, nothing is lost. He sees the whole picture. Rest in peace. And until our next chat.